This is SWEETLOVE, and we're creating madness with madness to creation. Thank you so much for joining me and letting me talk about my record and about how important mental health is and how I hope you walk away from this feeling a little bit less alone.
Welcome to the Madness to Creation podcast, where self-care and music merge. This is Maddie. How are you? Before we get into this conversation with the lovely Americana singer-songwriter SWEETLOVE, I must issue a trigger warning. We get into a very personal conversation about depression, anxiety, and suicide, and we understand the impact that it might have on the listener of this podcast. And at Madness Creation, we will provide a timestamp in the description on where the topic is addressed. That way you can just skip over the interview. Like I said, if you are feeling at the end of your rope, please reach out to somebody or call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, or even email us at madnesscreation@gmail.com. And we just want to let you know that it is okay to not be okay. And we love you, and I want to thank you guys so much for listening. And on a brighter note, SWEETLOVE has recently released an EP that I argue could be one of the top EPs of the year, entitled Goodnight Lover. And this EP is just so incredible. It really hits home, and it is very introspective. And you can tell that she poured all of her emotions into this EP. And we also get into a very deep conversation about this. And also, SWEETLOVE is a heroine because she was a nurse serving in the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic. And for those of you that are first responders and especially out in the medical field, we want to thank you so much for helping us get through the COVID-19 pandemic. While we are not out of the woods yet, we really want to show appreciation. And just remember, just to thank a doctor or thank a nurse. And it's just kind of one of those things where it's affected all of us, whether it's financially, emotionally, spiritually, or just feeling disillusioned from the media in general. And remember that COVID is more than a virus. Suicide rates have gone up exponentially, so have divorce rates and domestic violence rates. Make sure that you are practicing your self-care and that you are taking care of yourself. And Goodnight Lover is out now by SWEETLOVE, and you can listen to it in its entirety at madnesstocreation.com or on Spotify, of course. And you can also check out this podcast at Spotify, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Geo7, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, and Google Podcasts. And I cannot thank you guys so much enough for listening, and so much too. And on that note, here's our conversation with the lovely SWEETLOVE. Take it away, SWEETLOVE. So we'll start off the interview that way. What kind of tea do you like?
Oh my gosh. I kind of like all different kinds of tea. I'm very much an herbal tea person. I don't drink much caffeine. So this one's like a red dragon chai, some sort of thing. But I've been playing with, I don't know, I bought this like winter stash. And so it's like chamomile with apples and cinnamon and all the cozy stuff right now. It's cold in LA.
Well, is it cold in LA? Like, what temperature is it outside right now?
I mean, it's cold for LA. I guess I should say that. It's, let me see. I can tell you what temperature it is. Let me see. Oh, it's not cooperating. I think it's in the 50s probably. Oh no, 39. Yeah, so that's pretty chilly for LA.
That is awfully cold for LA.
It is. It is, and I don't care for it at all.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's kind of like what, I'm from Iowa, so that's kind of like what Iowa weather is. Like, it'll be like 39 degrees in like May, maybe in June sometimes. We get like a month of summer, and that's about it.
Nope. Hard no on that for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
spoiled LA weather girl.
Yeah, are you like a morning person or like?
I didn't used to be, but I work during the day and I have to get up, and I find that if I get up and I have some time to myself and I get to like play the piano or go for a run or something in the morning, it just makes my day so much better. So I sort of kicking and screaming turned into a morning person against my will.
Yeah, I'm a special needs teacher by day. So like
Oh,
sleeping,
wow.
I'm like, today was the first day of spring break. So I'm like, I get to sleep in and all that stuff. Here I am I got up at 6:15 this morning when I usually get up at 5:30, get ready for work. So 6:15 now
Same.
is sleeping in for me. So
Same. I know my 20-year-old me is so disappointed in me, but it's true. I do the same. And I like to have the peace and quiet in the morning before the world starts. It's really nice.
yeah, I found as I get older, I like mornings now. I don't know why, but just hearing the birds and all that stuff. And
I totally agree. I live in this cute little neighborhood, and I go walking up. I live in the cheap rental area, and I go walking up into the fancy area, and it's so pretty. There's trees everywhere, and it's just nice. It's just a nice, especially in LA. It's a nice little respite from traffic and sort of hustling everywhere. So
yeah, and basically during this podcast, we talk a lot about mental health. And
wonderful.
naturally we will talk about like in music, and we'll talk about just pretty much anything that comes up. It's kind of conversational based. I don't want
I
it to
love
be
it.
like, I don't want to be like, okay, next question is da da da. Next question I have
Totally.
for you.
I love
And
it.
yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to check out your music. I've been working 12-hour days, but I'm more into the lyrics that I read, and I kind of want to. Jillian was so kind to send me the lyrics.
Oh,
I'm also
great.
going to be reviewing music on the podcast as well, and on TikTok. I love TikTok. I have
Oh,
developed an addiction to it.
fantastic.
And I read the lyrics to "Before the Devil Knows You're Dead," and it is incredibly personal. And I know it's coming from your upcoming EP called "Goodnight Lover," and
It is.
the lyrics that kind of stuck out to me is I assume this is a chorus. I'll be honest with you, I'm not very well versed when it comes to like verse chorus, structure and
Yeah,
stuff.
no problem.
And just kind of I'm guessing this is the bridge of the song. It says, "I hope you're somewhere beside your dad under the sun out in a lawn chair, laughing all of the hard times in the warm air. I hope you're somewhere." And to me, that speaks of loss. And can you take us into that song and anything that you want to talk about the album? I'm just going to give you the floor.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, that's actually the last verse of the song. And it's funny, that's the first song I wrote for the record before I knew I was making a record. I was wanting to do more songwriting, and let's see, Christmas of 2017. So right at the beginning of 2018, my oldest friend in the world passed away from complications of mental illness. He was schizophrenic, and he had been not getting the health care that he needed. And he was my oldest. I mean, literally, we were not even a year old, maybe, when we met. In like one of those little mommy and me things. And he was, my brother, basically, all growing up. He was my first crush. He was my first kiss. He was all of these sort of seminal moments. And probably until I was maybe 18, I spent almost every day of my life with him in some way. We went to school together. We carpooled. I mean, all of that. So he was my family. And when he died, there was just something that really unraveled in me about it, that he was this beautiful soul, and he was always kind of tortured. And when I think he was in his 20s when we started having trouble. It's such a schizophrenia in particular, such a difficult thing, because you push people away. I remember when he started unraveling, he would send me these sort of long manifestos of things that frightened me for him, because they weren't necessarily based in reality. And then he became hard to get a hold of. His email wouldn't work and his phone wouldn't work. And I think he had trouble with drugs. And so it was just one of those things, when you lose someone to those circumstances, there's such a regret in it. You think, what could I have done? Should I have been more supportive? Should I have reached out to him more? So that was December of 2018. And then I went to New York in May, and I sat down with Zach Berkman, who's this wonderful writer. He's in the Heart Of, and I had never met him before. He was in Brooklyn, and I went up to his apartment. I was like, "Hey, nice to meet you." And he's like, "What do you want to talk about?" And I put some ideas out, but this was one of the ideas that I had told him, that, I'd lost my friend, and I wanted to write this sort of like that Irish blessing,
Sure.
May you be at an hour in heaven before the devil knows you're dead, kind of. And so this is the song we wrote in particularly for my friend Matt, who it broke my heart that he was suffering, and especially when someone is suffering, there is a measure of, you feel, I don't know if relief is the right word, because but you feel, I'm glad he's not suffering anymore. I do believe that he's in a place where his mind is free, and hopefully only his spirit, which is the unwounded part of him, or the unsick part of him, is what's out there, that's somewhere that's left. And so we wrote that song kind of to send him hopefully to a place where he isn't in pain anymore, or he isn't tortured by his mind anymore. And so that was the first song of the record, but I still didn't really know I was making a record. I was just writing, and I started writing with this writer named Jay Stolar, this wonderful writer. I think he wrote that song Brooklyn in the Summer. And I think he's been writing with all these wonderful people. And we started writing again, I wanted to, I just wanted to write. I wanted to be a better writer. I love writing. I wanted to know more about it and work with more people. And then in November of 2018, I lost a long time, another one of my oldest friends and a longtime love of mine to suicide, which completely devastated me. It just completely, and the only way I knew how to make sense of that was to just keep writing songs. Mm-hmm. And honestly, songwriting just saved me. It was a place where I could go and, just be in a room with someone. And songwriters are so thoughtful and caring, because their whole job is to sort of take emotions and take the human experience and make it accessible. And I think in order to do that, you have to understand and be compassionate. You have to be able to connect on some level with the human experience, or you can't write a song that moves people. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So I just started writing. And so Goodnight Lover, actually, Jay and I wrote before David died in November. We wrote it in October, and it was this kind of sweet little love song, you're falling in love with someone over the phone. And then we lost David. And then I started writing more and more in earnest about, obviously everything kind of changed. And then in January, that next January, my cousin, it's bleak to say, but my cousin essentially drank himself to death. And so I spent some time at his bedside in the hospital while he was dying and miserable. And so that year was particularly, it was hard in a number of levels, but it was also, I lost 3 people that in a sense destroyed themselves. And that's a really hard and heartbreaking thing to be around and to sort of come into contact with and start grappling with, especially in the case of suicide, because it's not just I know it's a slow progression up into the moment that they die, but because it's a singular event, it's such and such a final event. It's such you even more so think about what you could have done or said. So the record obviously became about that, and we went around and around about it. Which songs do we choose? What do we call it? And I just kept coming back to Goodnight Lover, because that for me was the sort of essence of what the record was about, is how do you say goodbye to, and it doesn't have to be because of death, how do you say goodbye to a relationship that you thought would last forever? How do you say goodbye to a parent? How do you say goodbye to a friend? Anything that you thought was going to last, or that you loved and didn't last. There's always sort of it's hard. How do you mourn the parts that were awful, and how do you take the parts of joy that how do you take your memories, and how do you honor that person's memory? David would have wanted, I think he would love the record. I think he would have loved that I made something beautiful out of something so terrible. I really do think he's free and not, again, not tortured by his mind, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just kind of digesting what you're saying, because we brought up some heavy topics and stuff. So, so do you find it considering these events, was it difficult for you to put these words together? And also with the 2 people that you wrote, Jay was one of them, and I can't remember the other name. I apologize for that. Did you meet them at a writer's workshop, or networking, or how did you meet them?
Actually, I met them through, I always feel like so LA when I say this, but I met them through my manager, Ryan Vaughn, who's not just a manager, but like he's my friend, he's my family. Like he's kind of shown up for me in ways that a lot of people haven't. You know, he's been a big supporter, and he's a drummer, and he manages artists, and he's been around for a long time. Did a lot of playing in New York, and so he actually connected me with with Stolar and with Zach. I had just told him that I wanted to do more writing, and he's like, "Oh, when you go to New York, I'll connect you with this person." And so it was, you know, like most of music, it was through mutual relationships.
Okay.
So, and that was wonderful, because that's the one thing I love about music. I feel like it's all art is like that. You can't do it without connectivity. But I think music in particular, it's like, I think kind of all musicians just really wanting to do is like get together and hang and make music. And if you can put something out and make money, I mean, obviously we want to do that too, but there's something organic for me about just, you know, you don't want to write a song with somebody you don't like. So at the end of the day, it becomes like a hang, you know?
Right.
So I think you also asked about, like, was it hard to write about is that right? The question?
Yeah. Was it like therapeutic, or was it difficult to come up with the words that you wanted to say in these songs?
Honestly, it was profoundly therapeutic. It was therapeutic in a way that I didn't anticipate necessarily. I mean, I knew that I needed to do it, but until I sort of got somewhat, not through, but, you know, until I got sort of further into the process, it was so profoundly therapeutic, because, you know, you go, I mean, when do you normally, if you're going through a hard time, you sit in a room and you spend 2 or 3 hours basically looking at with another person, a kind person, like a brilliant person, and looking at that experience. And because in order to get to the lyrics you want, or the ones that sing just right, or the ones that are the ones that land for you, you have to go through a lot that don't work, right? And so what the process is someone will say, you know, what about this line? And I'll say, oh, that doesn't quite feel right. And what for me, what it not forced me, because I wanted to do it, but what it helped me to do is come to an understanding of actually how I was feeling, come to an understanding of what I was going through in that moment in a clearer way than I was able to do before. And so it was, I mean, therapeutic, it really honestly kind of was like therapy for me. And I mean, I'm a huge believer in therapy, and I go to therapy on a regular basis, and it's changed my life completely. But this was obviously different, because it's also part of your art, and it's part of your spirit and your expression, and you get to be with another kind person who, you know. And so for me, it was like a kind of life-changing thing, because I not only realized that I want to write songs for sure for the rest of my life, and I want to be better and better at it, but I also would like to use that to help other people go through some kind of heartache or trauma or whatever it would be. I'd like to start creating a space where people can come and I can give back. I can help them, you know, look at something and maybe just either help them process it, or make it a little bit lighter, or just make them feel not alone in the process.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, based on what you said with helping people with trauma and stuff like that, do you think that's going to be more of a trend in music as we're going through this COVID pandemic? Or do you think we're going to see that, like, to be more of a trend where it's going to be like music is going to be seen as more as an outreach, as opposed to like just where we go watch an artist perform?
Man, I mean, I certainly deeply and sincerely hope so. I mean, for me personally, that's the case. And for a lot of my musician friends that I've been talking to throughout this time, I think we all feel a little bit, I have talked to a number of people about how, for me, and I realize this comes from a place of privilege, and I recognize that there have been silver linings for me in the pandemic, as far as, you know, I've always been hustling, you know, like killing myself hustling. I've been exhausted all the time for years. And because of the pandemic, and I have terrible FOMO, you know, so if someone's like, hey, come to a show, I don't want to miss that. I don't want to miss that moment, especially as cliche as it sounds, when you lose someone and you don't have any more time with them. The last thing I want to do is be like, oh, I could have gone to hang out with them when I had a chance and I didn't, you know, or I could have had that moment, that shining moment, or I could have seen that artist play, all those things. I don't like to miss out on those things. But I think for me, there was a gift in physically not being able to get out and hustle. And so I was forced to think about the people that I really wanted to spend time with. You know, I was forced to, I was with my family for 3 months. I lived with them and I had the most magical time, like snuggling my sister's babies. And I sat out in the patio and played guitar for a couple hours a day, which I just would normally never have the time to do. And so my guitar playing transformed, and I wrote, I started writing with a new writer, and there were a lot of things that came in that I think like spoke to me, like sort of, I feel like all the noise kind of went away, and I was able to sort of take a moment and think about what I really want. And what I really want is to be with my friends and be with my family and make music. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And so I hope that, I do think that, I'm sure, especially in the months to come, everyone's going to be wanting to get out and and party and, roaring 20s all over again. But everyone I talk to, and myself in particular, for sure, I feel like I hope I take these moments with me, where I'm more careful about where I spend my time, and I'm more, I focus on the people that matter, and I slow down a little bit. So.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of tore the veil, so to speak, on how people prioritize things and stuff like that. And I know I did a lot of reflecting, and did experience of the loss that you had with the 3 people that you mentioned. Did that really, the reflection kind of bring that to the forefront, like during the shutdown, the quarantine?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think when you have a loss that sort of unmoors you, or sort of shakes your foundations, or makes you think about things in a different way, I don't think you're ever going to go back to being the person that you were, because you have this other knowledge, and it's almost like it's in your body, it's like on a cellular level. So I feel like personally, I have definitely transformed in many ways, even just the ways of like, there's things I used to worry about that I just don't care about anymore. Even as small as when David died, I stopped wearing makeup. I go out and all, but I, like, on a daily basis, I kind of stopped, I just stopped worrying. It was, at the time, it just took too much energy. I just didn't care. But as I've gone along, I just feel like I'm like, I kind of like just being me. And again, like, I love getting dressed up. I love going out. I have absolutely no issue with it if it makes you feel like it's you. And I love all that, for sure. But I don't know, the pandemic, it definitely, I feel like grief strips you down to your sort of basic elements, and then you rebuild from there. And hopefully a more sort of, I almost feel like ground is such an overused word, but that's how it feels like, and then I think in the pandemic, obviously at the beginning, everyone's frightened and you don't know what to expect. You don't know so everyone's just kind of like, oh shit, like excuse me. I don't know if
you're fine.
Okay. And then I think as you go along, everyone I know is really sort of, had to sit with themselves on some level in a way they never had to before. And I think that's always profound, no matter what you come out of it with.
Definitely.
Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you sure did. And the last podcast we just released this morning, it was with a band called the Dead Deads, and she brought up like how, like, post-pandemic, she believes that it's going to be kind of a paradigm shift where we will never see another normal again. Do you kind of see it that way too?
I do, in a sense of like, I do. It's a once in 100 years event, and the world is so profoundly different than it was 100 years ago, in a way that I don't know that there have been 100 years in the history of mankind that have had so much change, I think, in the world. And so I do think so. I work in healthcare, and I work, and I don't talk about it a lot with the music, because I don't, sort of want it to seem like I'm, stepping into that world too much, and as I'm promoting myself, do you know what I mean? So I want to be careful with that work, but I am involved in the pandemic response and the vaccine response, and on a relatively high level. And I think that, even just like Zoom, even just the fact that we can sit here and talk, I never did Zoom calls on my own before. And I know that's a small thing, except now I have access to you. Maybe I wouldn't have before, or, there are things that have happened where I think we'll never go back. And I think there has been profound loss, and I don't want to minimize that at all, because I know And that's why I say, like, when I talk about coming from a point of privilege, you know, like I'm healthy, my family is healthy, I have a job. A lot of people can't say that, and that's awful. It's horrific, and it's hard. I don't know how to exactly frame it without sounding like I wish that hadn't happened. But I do think that when terrible things happen, I think there are moments of grace that you can then choose to sort of take your life and transition. And I don't think will be the same. And I hope that not being the same ends up being something that we can bring some beauty out of it together.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I agree 100%. Like, I think as you said, we're going to be more careful. I think I think naturally there's going to be some people that are going to go on like nothing happened, but I think that's just in our human nature. And I also think we're going to be a lot more conscious, you know, like, for example, like, I used to be one of those people, like, if I was sick, I would come to work unless I was dying. Now, if I don't feel well, I don't come to work.
Yep.
You know, that's just the way it is, because I don't want to potentially spread anything to somebody else. And let's kind of go back to your music. And I kind of want to highlight a couple lyrics in Goodnight Lover, which I really appreciate again. And if you just want to take it in the set on after I cover the lyrics,
sure.
It says, been a long time coming. I've been sharp around the tongue. Better when they're gone, safer on my own. But you, lover, you're cutting through the stone. I feel you in my lungs, my body and my bone.
Mm-hmm.
That's really deep. And I don't know how to describe that. That's just, it's just one of those song lyrics where I'm just like taken back, like, how does a person come up with this? So what was going on in your head when you wrote that?
I'm so glad you like it. You know, it's really funny. I very distinctly remember the moment that we wrote that, because I was writing it with Jay Stolar, and he was in New York at the time. I think it might have been our first session. And I had met someone that, you know, was kind of, I was sort of, you know, we were sort of like at the beginnings of talking on the phone. And I was telling Jay that I definitely am a person that, you know, I can be especially when I get like anxious or uncomfortable, I can be sharp with my work. You know what I mean? I mean, my family is we are sort of witty, clever. You know, we're always sort of teasing each other, and so I come by that honestly, for sure. You know, there's a lot of teasing in my family, but I also can be. I think it's a way of sort of keeping people back. You know, or sort of if I get uncomfortable or get anxious, I think it's a way of me sort of protecting myself in a way, which usually ends up doing the opposite, right? But, you know, I feel like when you do things out of anxiety or a place of, you know what I mean, that sort of a place, it's usually obviously like it's either trauma informed or you know, it usually doesn't come from like in this moment. It comes from when you were 5, or it comes from when you were 10. You know, it comes from whatever tools you didn't have or whatever things you're trying not to look at. At least for me, that's anxiety. When I deal with it, it's usually because there's something I don't want to feel, or something that I can't bear to feel, or there's something that I'm afraid and I'm trying to protect myself. So that's kind of where that lyric came from. Is I'm, you know, I can be sort of like it's funny. I think in my family, like I grew up with lots of dichotomies, and so I find that in myself. You know, like I am incredibly warm and incredibly generous, but I'm also like, I'm a little standoffish when I first meet people until I get to know you. And then I'm sort of like, you can't get rid of me. You know, I'm like in your corner. So I feel like that verse in particular to me is like, there's a longing in it, you know, because I desperately want to be unraveled by someone. And yet I find it hard to allow myself to be.
Yeah. And that's so common with people that have anxiety. I know, because I have an anxiety disorder myself. And it's just kind of one of those things where, like, there are days where it's just like, I'm just so exhausted, stuff like that. And when this is over, and I'm saying when, not if, how do you plan on reaching out to those that suffer from trauma, suffer from mental health disorders, stuff like that?
I mean, I think, honestly, I mean, experiences like this, like talking to you, I think are things that I'd love to do more. This is wonderful. And I'm so grateful that you've given me the space, and particularly to have a conversation around mental health in particular. I think it's hard to talk about, especially if you are a person that like is promoting your art and you're promoting a quote unquote brand, which I know sounds terrible, but in a sense that's true, right? When you are an artist and you're putting yourself out on these platforms, it's almost like a separate thing from you, even though you want to be authentic. And, I just launched a sort of, like a sort of offering of songwriting sessions for people that are interested in, that might not be able to, they've written a song, they're not musicians necessarily, and maybe they don't want to go to therapy, maybe they want to like make something beautiful. So I've actually opened up some like private songwriting sessions with my writing partner, just if anyone wants to sort of have that kind of an experience. I'd like to do that more. There's an organization that I'm going to blank on now because I'm on the spot. Let me see if I can find it really quick. But there's an organization out of Nashville that writes songs with veterans, actually. And David was a veteran, and he had PTSD, and I'm sure that was a large component of sort of, I think, some of the mental anguish that he was experiencing. And so I particular feel like I think we don't do right by our veterans, and so I'd really love to be able to work, genuinely work I've been looking into like music therapy programs, and so I'm just at the beginning of the journey. So I can't, honestly, I'm sorry, I don't have like an answer where it's like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do.
Oh, that's okay. You have ambitions. That's the important thing.
These are the things that I'm looking into, these are the things that oh wait, here I have this, I think I have the answers for you. Anyway, I can't find them now. Oh yeah, here it is. Operation Song. Operation Song is, awesome. Yeah. And I think a lot of Nashville writers participate in it. And it's Nashville based, but they do retreats for veterans. And I just thought, what a beautiful thing to just let somebody come into a room and just not just talk, but make something beautiful out of their pain. I feel like there's something incredibly healing in that experience where it's not just, you're not, and again, like I said, I'm a huge fan of therapy. I think everyone should go. I think it's changed my life in so many ways. Almost everything everything great in my life, even like music and my relationships in music, I think I can trace back to doing the work. Right. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I think there is something so magical about being able to like make a beautiful song out of it that people listen to. And it's a unique, beautiful experience that I think more people should be able to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I would like to have Operation Song someday on the podcast, and I will certainly be reaching out to them to see if they want to do some type of partnership or whatever. And that's what it's about, is just being there for each other and stuff like that. And do you plan on doing like any live streams, or I know California is pretty shut down still. So do you plan on like having any concerts, like any tour dates coming up or anything like that? Or are you going to kind of wait till the dust settles, so to speak?
It's a little bit of both. Because I work in healthcare, I've had to be extra careful. Sure. Obviously, I work around cancer patients, so I have to be very, very careful. So I've been honestly just kind of holed up. As people start getting vaccinated, and now that we know that vaccinated people can spend time together, I will be, for sure. I don't have a specific date because I'm just at the beginning of like, okay, I'm going to start thinking about, so I'm hoping like April, like next month, and I will let you know. Thank you for asking. I'm just at the cusp of like, okay, the world's slowly starting to become, I think you can make safe choices now. And so I'm getting ready, and I'm really excited to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I just got to say, I know you don't really like to broadcast, as you said, but you are a hero to me for all that you do for music and for your like working in the healthcare field. I really don't know how you do it, because I've heard some crazy stories in regards to COVID and all that stuff. And what else? What else would you like to plug in regards to Goodnight Lover, like where people can find it and all that good stuff?
Yeah, thank you so much. So my artist name is SWEETLOVE, and I'm on all the platforms. I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple Music, I'm on Deezer, all the places you would find music. So you can go there, and I have 4 singles out from the record now, actually. Let's see, the last one is "Did You Even Know?" It just came out a few weeks ago, which I wrote for David, actually. And I think I love all the songs are beautiful to me in different ways. Did You Even Know? Somehow the producer, Justin Glasgow, is this wonderful producer, and he sort of lifted it to this beautiful place where I just was like, every time I listen to it, I'm like, oh, it just, it sounds so beautiful. So I have 4 singles out. Let's see, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, Devil on Your Shoulder, and The House are and then the full record is actually coming out next Friday, the 26th. So you can, so if you find me on my Instagram, I'm SweetLove Sounds on Instagram and Facebook, and you can pre-order the record, which would be lovely. As an independent artist, it really helps you to get some, pre-saves and all of that. It would be wonderful. So if anyone is interested, and then the full record, like I said, drops, and that Goodnight Lover is coming out. That song will be on the record when it comes out next week.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to say, I'm definitely going to pre-save it to, if anything, to help with the algorithms. I'm definitely, absolutely, I'm going to help with listening to it and all that stuff. So, like a couple more questions that we usually ask guests on the podcast. Long story short, I'm creating a book that's going to be due out either next year or the year after. Depends on.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It's called Lighthouses in the Darkest Distance, and that's how us in the biz get through the difficult times. And it's based upon how just hearing so many stories of how fans have came up to artists and be like, your music has saved my life. And I want to hear how the artists had their lives saved by music. Mm-hmm. And take us into your soundtrack to your life. It could be a song, an album, a genre, an artist, or a band. What is soundtrack to your life? And I know sometimes it can change moment by moment,
Of course. I mean, I do love all music, but I will say, I grew up listening to folk singers on vinyl, Peter Paul Mary and Joni Mitchell. And so I grew up with these sort of poetic protest songs, and they were honestly all those songs they all tell a story. And I grew up, my dad is a consummate storyteller, and my parents were both teachers, and so I think that's a huge thing, so I was so influenced by these kinds of music, when you can immerse yourself in a story of something, and if you can make it universal, which what we try to do with the songs that are coming out, I think if you can find these human moments, then even if someone didn't lose someone, like I lost someone in the exact manner they lost someone, they can certainly relate to the nostalgia of not seeing an old friend for a long time, or losing a love, or in any fashion. And I think that's hugely informed my writing is these sort of sweet at the end of I love where the music has gone. I'm blown away by what Justin did with the tracks. But I think for me, it starts with the stories, it starts with the moment in this little snapshot in life that makes a life worth living, or these, what I mean? Even if it's for good or sad or happy or grief or whatever, it's all that package is part of a life. So that was a huge thing for me. And then I also grew up in the church, in a church. I mean, it was a pretty demonstrative church. So I grew up with sort of, music has always been a form of worship to me. So I think there is that element. I have a lot of biblical references in my songs, and I'm not an observer of a religion, and I don't go to church anymore, but I can't, the notion of music bringing you closer to God is something that's, I think, always going to be with me. I think music is, so I think those are the two sort of biggest influences as far as sort of how it informs the way I think and the way I write. And honestly, lately, the people that I really love to listen to are the people that I know, and thankfully, the people that I know are brilliant. They're making brilliant music. Like my friend Wes, who I have a Christmas song out, actually. We wrote a Christmas duet called Christmas Without You. And we wrote it literally in the middle of the pandemic, and it ended up being kind of a perfect thing. And he's a wonderful songwriter, and he has this this project called Guns for Gold, which had a song on Shameless. And that, like, it's a fantastic song. And then he's got a bunch of wonderful music on his own. I listened to his stuff. Bill Saint, who sang all the backup on my record, has a song out recently called "We Really Need Each Other," and it's one of the. I mean, even if I didn't know her, it'd probably be one of my favorite songs that's come out in the last year. So, like, it's just beautiful. So I'm also really informed and inspired by, honestly, people that I know, because I know their stories, I know who they are, and I know what it takes to get a song together and get it out into the world. And so I'm always really mostly moved by, people that I know.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because last year I interviewed Tyler from a band called Theory of a Dead Man, and and they have their song called Medicate, which has probably, I kid you not, 200 million hits on YouTube. And at first I thought it was just kind of a cheesy song at first. And I was interviewing, well, first of all, it's Theory of a Dead Man. They're a big band. But then Tyler was like one of the nicest people I've ever interviewed. And then he brought up what Medicate meant. And then I looked at the YouTube comments, and so many comments about how that song helped them achieve sobriety and literally save their lives. I absolutely love the song now. So it's one of those things, like, for me, it's like based upon connection now. Like I hear some of my friends say, "Oh, that Medicaid song sucks," and I'm like, no, it doesn't. You gotta dig deeper and get into the truth of what it's about. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And we usually close the podcast with I feel like I'm put you on the spot here, but like some type of, we've talked about mental health. We've talked about like schizophrenia. We've talked about like PTSD and stuff like that. I just kind of want you to speak from the heart for those that are listening that might suffer from mental health disorders or PTSD. Obviously, that's a mental health disorder, or like substance addiction or anything like that, or that are thinking like suicidal thoughts or whatever. Anything that you want to say as a message for our listeners?
Oh man, thank you for that. Yeah, I personally have struggled with depression and anxiety for a lot of my life. And the depression was so bad for so many years that I didn't even realize I was anxious as well. I didn't know they kind of go hand in hand. They're like these evil twins, where it's like if you have one, you often have the other, and back and forth. And I grew up in a time or a house that my parents are beautiful, loving, wonderful people, but all families have difficulties, right? And I just grew up, I wasn't able to be myself. There was a lot of fear and anxiety in the house, and a lot of it centered around religion. And consequently, it sort of caved me in on myself. And sometimes, like, the depression was so bad that I would think about harming myself. And it took me years. It took me years of, and the hard thing, as I'm sure you know, is when you have these sort of depression and or anxiety, fighting for yourself becomes so much harder, because depression in particular lies to you and tells you that it's always going to be this bad. It lies. But at the moment, you don't know it. And it feels so bad that when you start to feel better, it almost feels like a betrayal of how bad you felt. And so there's a part of you, at least this is my experience, where you don't want to feel better. And you're angry when people try to make you feel better, because it's almost like you're taking away from how bad I feel. And it's such a terrible spiral. And so I can say, and I want to tread lightly on this, because when people used to say things like this to me, it almost made me feel worse. It's like, it will get better. And I don't want to say it like that, because it didn't just get better, but I clawed and fought my way through therapy for years. And, and then when this therapist sort of it's like any relationship, things work, and then you get to a point, and then you have to find someone new, or you need a new relationship, or whatever it is. I've had the wonderful fortune of working over the last, particularly 10 years, with some really wonderful and brilliant therapists. So, the depression is largely lifted, and now it's like, oh, cool, anxiety is here, but I'm also dealing with that. And, I don't know sometimes in this, a large cosmic question of why do some people Why are some people able to be saved and some aren't? I wish I had a better answer for that. I do know it is possible. I know, and I know, like, in my bones, I know for sure that it is possible for you to feel better and like make your way out into the light, you know, and actually have like feel connection and feel joy, and not every day, all the time, and not in this Pollyanna sense of everything's going to be fine, because I know how awful it feels. But I just, having lost someone, more than one person that couldn't get the help they needed or didn't reach out early enough until it was, you know what I mean, until the darkness was sort of consuming them, I would just beg you, you know, that's the other thing that depression and these things do, is they lie and tell you that people are better off without you. And I can tell you for a fact that I'm not better off without David. Yeah. So, or more Matthew or Teddy. So I would just say, you know, reach out, DM me if you want, I'll do my best. Like, you know what I mean? Whatever. Just, there are resources there. Sometimes people don't know how bad it is. Sometimes you have to ask, even as awkward as it is. And sometimes you ask and you don't get the help you need, which is even worse. And all I can say is, I hope you keep going. You know, I hope you take a little moment, even if it's just a sliver of light, and keep going.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And if I was there, I would just give you a big hug right now, because you have such a beautiful soul, and you're a beautiful person and everything like that. And
how kind of you. Thank you. You too.
Well, thanks. And for the listeners, you can find SweetLove at SweetLove Sounds at Facebook and Instagram. Do you have TikTok by chance?
I don't think I do. I'm so bad on the TikTok. I should. I'm going to do it. You know what? You inspired me. I'm on there somewhere, but I don't even know what the name is. So
okay, yeah, just find me at Madness to Creation, and I'll be doing 1 minute to Madness TikTok reviews and quick reactions, and also through the Headliner app, I'll also be posting 1 minute clips of the podcast. So.
Amazing! Yeah, I'll set up a SweetLove TikTok. That's what I'll do. So I can.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll follow you back and stuff. And and the door is open whenever you want to jump back on, like as like a monthly guest or whatever you want to do. So
I would love that. Honestly, I love talking to you, and this is a subject that I'm, very dear to my heart, as you can imagine. So please let me know whenever if you have a slot, I'll be back.
Awesome. And maybe we could come up with some type of project together or something too. That would be really amazing.
That would be wonderful. I would love it.
Yeah. And I was going to say, naturally this part will be cut out. But if I type in a promo line, could you do a promo line for the podcast?